Okay, so what do you know? I'm going to read some of these. Tell me everything you know about DNA. DNA makes up the individuals and their individual characteristics, gives me my genes. Everyone has different DNA, makes us different. It's chemical in makeup. It's acids, deoxyribonucleic acid. We're made of DNA. It makes us who we are. I have it. That's in us. Foundation in both humans and other organisms. It's the stuff needed for humans and other organisms to function, made up of nucleotides. There are 4 different styles of things found in it, which are thymine, adenine, guanine, cytosine. Genetic blueprint for the body makes up protein, passed down, found in living things. Let's see, is there anything else we're missing? Self-replicating carrier of genetic information present in most living things, makes up your body and made of proteins and chemicals. Deoxyribonucleic acid or something like that. Long string-like macromolecule, basic building block in every living organisms, replicates when offspring are made. Okay, so here's the thing. We already talked about DNA. We did DNA and protein synthesis. So we did a bunch of stuff with DNA. So you know a lot of stuff about DNA. The part that we talked about was what DNA does, like how protein gets made from DNA, how protein codes for DNA, or how protein is coded for. We didn't talk about how it gets passed down. That's the genetics part, and that's what we're going to start now. Everything you know about how DNA is passed on. Hair color, eye color. 50% is the mother's, 50% is the father's. Offspring gets traits from mother and father. Half the DNA from each parent is passed to offspring. Through sexual reproduction for traits. Breeding, daughter cells duplicate into daughter cells, passed down to children, passed through genes. Offspring gets half the DNA from the mother and half from the father. Sexual reproduction combines traits, 2 organisms through insemination. Well, yeah. DNA passes off their genetic information to their offspring, half the DNA from each parent, half from the mother, half from the father. When DNA is passed on from one organism to its offspring, it's called cell division. Your DNA is passed on through genetics, passed through cells, gets transferred during an asexual or sexual act through children. Replicates, goes through, okay, so good. Tell me everything you know about where DNA is stored. Now, we did this with bacteria. We didn't do it with eukaryotes such as yourselves and maple trees and blue whales and mice and ladybugs and all that. I know the DNA is in the cell nucleus. Wait, what? Nucleus. We're going to talk about chromosomes. DNA is stored in cells. No idea. DNA is stored in the nucleus of the cell, used to copy instructions. Molecule kept in the nucleus. Stored in my body everywhere. Stored in the nucleus. Stored in you, in the cells. And the cells can be found in mitochondria and nucleus throughout their bodies, in the cells, in the nucleus. Stored in cell chromosomes in your body. Stored in the nucleus, your chromosomes. Stored in the nucleus, stored in cells, stored in cells. We think it's in cells. That's what it sounds like. And it is, and a few people correctly hit that in eukaryotes like us, it's in the nucleus of the cells, and even further, it's in a little nucleolus inside the nucleus. What's a chromosome? This is a tougher question than you might think. Carrier of genetic information found in the nucleus, carries genes, thread of nucleotides and proteins found in the nucleus, thread-like structure like a twisted ladder. Chromosome is thread-like strand of DNA, structure of proteins and acids found in living things, looks like an X. Chromosome comes from an organism to help give traits. A gene, acids and proteins in most living cells, carries the genes for an organism. A piece of DNA, thread-like structure of nucleic acids. So lots of thread-like structures in the nucleus, found in the nucleus, unit of storage, places that store DNA. Okay, now, can you see DNA? People have different opinions on this. Some of them, but your opinion doesn't matter because there's a correct answer and not, but that's okay. We're just exploring right now. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, don't get me started. So you can see DNA through a microscope. You can match DNA to people through a criminal database. I don't know how it's done. We can't see DNA, but we can see representations. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. No, we can't. No, we can't. No, not the spiral chain. No, we can't see DNA. You can see DNA with a microscope. DNA is too small to see. Yes, it looks like a spiraled ladder. Yes, but there are models of DNA, but it's too small to be seen. We can see DNA. DNA looks like a spiral ladder. Yes, no, nothing. What? We can see representations of DNA, and they are like string with connections. We can see DNA under a microscope, maybe? Not sure. We can see it with parents and their children. No, it's microscopic, but we can see replications. I don't know. We can't see it, but we can see representations. I mean, I don't think you can see it. It's just chemicals and proteins that make up our body. IDK. Yeah, no, yes, DNA is too small to see, but there are models of what it looks like. Okay. Now, how do you determine relatedness with DNA? We'll actually come back to that because that's going to be the part that we do after gamete day and everything else. I want to talk about chromosomes. See my nice picture of my Beaver Local blanket up there? Isn't that lovely? So I want you to imagine a couch on a Sunday afternoon. You and your siblings and your friends and your cousins have been watching a movie marathon for the last 24 hours. You got 46 blankets, and they're all piled up with pillows, and they're interwoven, and there's probably popcorn in the folds of everything. Now you have to take all 46 blankets, just you, and you have to carry them downstairs. Is that easy? No, of course not. It's a big mess. What if you folded them up neatly? Would that be easier? Yes. Yes, it would. So, on your desk, you should all find a piece of string. Nice big messy pile of string, like this. We've used string to represent a molecule before. Do you remember what molecule it represents? DNA. And we said that DNA is far too chaotic to just be loose in the cell nucleus, especially if you have 46 individual strands of DNA. So, what we have to do is wrap it around some proteins. And once it's wrapped around a nice chunk of protein, it's much more manageable. So I'm going to give you a little piece of pipe cleaner here, and you get to wrap your piece of DNA around some protein. So what I've done is I've gone from a piece of just plain old DNA here. Is that a chromosome yet? So it's DNA wrapped around protein. It's actually not a chromosome yet. So it's definitely neater. It's nicely woven. It's, rather than like a loose collection of threads making up this blanket, it's a blanket. But if I had to transport 46 of those little pieces, it would still be kind of challenging. So this is chromatin. Chromatin. Like tin cans. And I'm clarifying this, I'm spending a little bit of time on this because this is something that was never explained to me clearly in biology all the way through a bachelor's degree in biology. And I always felt confused, and I realized it was because this piece never got explained to me. So I want to explain it to you. So on a normal daily basis, inside the nucleus of your cells, you've got these long thread-like pieces of DNA wrapped around protein. They're called chromatin. It is still wrapped around proteins, but it's still long and spaghetti-like. If those cells are going to reproduce, a couple things have to happen. If we want to make sure that each of the new cells gets all the DNA, we have to copy each piece of DNA, so we now have 2 pieces of DNA. So where you had 46, for a brief moment here, you're going to have, 98? Yeah. Hard math. So, 92, yeah, that's right. So then those 2 pieces of chromatin hook up and become connected. Now this is starting to look more like what you've seen, but it's not done yet. Because the next thing that's going to happen is they are actually going to fold themselves up. Have you ever seen those things where you can put all your clothes in a bag and it's got an attachment for your vacuum cleaner and you suck the air out? Okay, and it compresses everything. That's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to take this blanket from that to something very compact like that with a vacuum cleaner. Except there's no real vacuum cleaner, you understand that. It's a metaphor. So that chromatin is going to fold up on itself until it's a nice, thick little structure. Guess what that structure is called? That's a chromosome. Okay? So that's the part that I never quite got, the difference between that chromatin and chromosome and just plain old DNA. So, plain old DNA wrapped around proteins is chromatin. During the point when cells are reproducing, it actually ends up in the form of chromosomes, and they look like those little X structures that we're all familiar with. So we good on that? We can tell the difference. Excellent. Now let's look at actual pictures of chromosomes. Okay, this is a karyotype. And that is an actual picture of someone's chromosomes. Kind of cool, huh? So you'll notice that there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, And they are literally numbered. Now, this is obviously a human karyotype because humans have got 23 pairs. And for each pair, for pair 1, you have a copy that you got from your mama and a copy you got from your papa. So you have a maternal and paternal contribution for each pair of chromosomes. For chromosome number 2, you have a copy you got from your mama and a copy you got from your papa. Because I like saying yo mama, yo papa. Get used to it. We got 4 weeks of this to go. So for every one of those, you got 1 copy from each parent. And we're going to sort of fence off the first 22 pairs. So I want you to look at those first 22 pairs, and you can talk to the people at your table. You can talk to yourself if you're all by yourself. Figure out what trends you see in those chromosomes as we go from chromosome pair 1 to pair 22. Anybody notice any differences in size as you go? Yeah. So chromosome 1 is the largest of the 23 chromosomes, or the 23 pairs of chromosomes that humans have. And they're actually named that way on purpose. So they took all the chromosomes that humans have, they lined them up in descending order. So this is like lining up for class pictures or whatever, where the tallest people are in the front, shortest people are in the back, and they numbered them 1 through 23. So the first pair is the longest, and it's actually literally a longer piece of DNA. The DNA, sections of that DNA are genes. There are literally more genes on chromosome 1 than there are in chromosome 22. There's more genetic information on that big chromosome. It's kind of like the amount of information I can store in here versus the amount of information I can store in here. A big notebook versus a small notebook. You can store more information if you've got more pages, literally. So, poor little gene 22 doesn't have a whole lot of information on it. It's a very short little piece of DNA. Chromosome 1 has got a lot of information. Okay, so let's talk about these first 22 pairs. So these first 22 pairs of chromosomes are called your autosomes. They're sometimes called body chromosomes, and all the things like hair color and height and telling your cells how to build hemoglobin to carry oxygen in your bloodstream. Those are all carried on genes on those first 22 pairs. My crooked pinky mutation, my weird crooked pinkies, are carried on an autosomal chromosome. So one of my chromosomes told my body a long time ago to produce a weird middle bone in my finger, and I have crooked pinkies. I can never be a hand model. It's a tragedy, I know. They were never broken. They just look that way. We actually reference the chromosomes by number. So we actually, because we've done the whole human genome, they didn't know this stuff when I was in school, but we can now say on chromosome 17 is a gene that controls this. Oh, the gene that controls that is on chromosome 12. We know this stuff. How crazy is that? And there are a whole lot of characteristics, a whole lot of traits that are carried on those autosomes. Now, in a perfect world, you got 2 of each pair. Remember, you got 1 from your mama, you got 1 from your papa, right? So I'd like you to look at another picture, and you can put the picture, I gave you a similar picture to this. Here. Having 2 of each pair we call a diploid cell. Di-2, 2 of each pair. As long as we have 2, one maternal, one paternal in each pair, that cell is diploid. Now I'm going to show you another karyotype for an individual, and we're going to play a little game. You don't get to shout it out, but it's sort of a which of these things Where's the issue? This is a karyotype. Figure out where there's an issue. When you can pop this in, you have a slide that's very similar to this. You can pop this into your dossier. Circle the issue when you find it. Hey, look at chromosome 21. Somebody got a bonus. How many copies of chromosome 21 are there? 3. So this is what we call a trisomy. Tri means how many? 3. So in a trisomy defect, somebody got 1 extra copy of one of the chromosomes. So this individual has what's called trisomy 21. So here's the interesting thing. Well, we're going to talk about what that does. We're going to talk about that. So if you have a trisomy on chromosome 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you're dead. You don't survive. You don't make it actually past like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks conception. I think 6 weeks is usually the critical point. So a fertilized egg that has a trisomy on any one of those first 17 chromosomes, the woman's body sorts it out, takes a look at it, this is all metaphor, of course, and goes, yep, not compatible with life. And there's a miscarriage. And it happens a lot. So, either an egg had 1 extra chromosome or a sperm had 1 extra chromosome. Either way, the fertilized egg has got a trisomy on one of the first 17 chromosomes, and it does not fly. There are too many sets of instructions. I like to bake. I've mentioned this. I have my favorite scone recipe. Scones are like a sweetened biscuit with fruit and nuts and glaze. I love scones. And I have my favorite recipe, which is Out of Joy of Cooking. And then I have the Fanny Farmer baking book. And I have The World in Your Kitchen, and that's got a scone recipe. And I can follow one of those recipes at a time. If I attempt to follow all 3 recipes at a time, the scones will be a flaming disaster, train wreck, fit only for the compost, and nothing good will happen. With a trisomy error, you've got too many sets of instructions. So the body is programmed with the 2 sets of chromosomes that you normally get. It looks at the directions on each one. It takes the dominant instruction and disregards the recessive instruction, in simplest terms, if there are 2 options, if it's something that has a dominant and a recessive. In a trisomy, it can't do that because there are 3 sets of instructions. So trisomies up through 17 are fatal. Oh yeah, trisomy on 19, 20, 22, those are fatal too. So 18 and 21 are both survivable trisomies. I'm going to show you now. When individuals have a trisomy, their life is not going to be the same as their life would have been without the trisomy. So 18 is called Edwards syndrome, and I'd have to look it up. Children with Edwards syndrome have pretty short lives. I don't think they usually make it to 10 years of age, but they've got a whole cluster of issues, health issues, cognitive issues. And then trisomy 21, this is the best known trisomy and probably the most common there because it's very survivable. So let me show you a picture of somebody with trisomy 21. Am I rocking this extra chromosome or what? So what is trisomy 21? Down syndrome. A 3rd copy of the 21st chromosome generates the whole set of features that we associate with Down syndrome. So there are distinct cognitive issues. Typically, individuals with Down syndrome are less cognitively able than they would have been otherwise. If they've got siblings, they're going to stand out in terms of cognitive ability. Now, people with Down syndrome are capable of a whole lot more than we used to think they were. I mean, we used to kind of put those people at institutions and assume that they'd be lucky if they could be toilet trained. And there are now people with Down syndrome who work in jobs. I mean, not rocket science, but, who can have lives and have jobs and work in the community, and that's awesome. There are some other features that come along with trisomy 21. One of them is, and this is a visible one. When you see a baby with Downs, you look at the baby and go, Okay, Downs. There's no fold over the eye. So this is called the epicanthic fold. People whose ancestors are mostly from Africa, Europe, North America, any place other than Asia, typically have a fold over their eye. People whose ancestors are primarily from Asia typically don't. That's what we think of as Asian-looking eyes. And folks with Down syndrome typically lack that fold over the eye. So that's a noticeable thing. What's a little less noticeable just looking at someone with Downs, what you might not know, is that individuals with Downs typically lack muscle tone. So babies with Downs are often described as being kind of floppy. Your average baby can hold their head up on their own by 3 or 4 weeks. A baby with Downs might take 3 or 4 months to do that. So they lack some muscle tone. Very often you'll see people with Downs seem to have a hard time controlling their tongue and their mouth. You'll see the tongue come out a lot. And that's also partly a lack of muscular control with the jaw. So they can't help it. It's not something they're doing to irritate. It's just there's a difference in muscle tone. There are also some heart defects that typically come along with Down syndrome with trisomy 21. So individuals with trisomy 21 probably aren't going to live to be 90. Now, at one time, a baby born with trisomy 21, in the 50s or 60s might have had a life expectancy of 20 or 30 years. And that's expanded as medical care has gotten better. But it's a different life. It is a different life. It's a good life. When you see interviews with people who have Down syndrome, a lot of them like their life. And they love their family, and they love the things that they do. And, of course, they don't know what they're missing because they've been that way their whole lives. They were born that way. But that is a survivable trisomy. Now, we're going to come back to this. I want you to think about the terms normal and usual. Is it normal to have 3 copies of your 21st chromosome? It is for her. It isn't for me. It is for her. Now, is it usual? No. The usual arrangement is 2 copies of each chromosome. So, and this applies to a whole lot of things, especially in biology. Normal is what's normal for you. Usual is what's common. So let's look at another karyotype. Find the issue. This should be the 3rd one I shared with you. Well, you know what? Before we talk about this particular issue, let's go back to our original karyotype, because we didn't talk about these chromosomes. So we said that the first 22 pairs were autosomes. Do you know what the last pair, the 23rd pair, is called? These are your sex chromosomes. Yeah, they had to be, huh? So sex chromosomes determine biological sex. And biological sex, we're talking about plumbing and primary sexual characteristics. So when I say plumbing, that's whether you have a penis and testicles or a vagina and a uterus and ovaries. It's whether you produce eggs or you produce sperm. That is the primary sexual characteristic. We should write that down. So primary sexual characteristics are plumbing and gametes, which gametes you're making. On those sex chromosomes, there are other genes, other than the ones that code for should we build a penis or should we build a vagina, when we're talking about, a bundle of 164 cells. So we also have on there secondary sexual characteristics. Secondary, I'm going to abbreviate that, secondary sex care. So, secondary sexual characteristics. Are there a lot of species in which you can identify males and females on site? Yeah. Cardinals. How can you tell a boy cardinal from a girl cardinal? Boys are red. Girls are sort of brown. Their color is a secondary sexual characteristic. Their primary sexual characteristic is that they produce eggs or sperm. Their secondary is what color their feathers are. We have sex-linked chickens, which are amazingly awesome because you don't have to wait 8 weeks to know if it's going to be a rooster or not. It's fantastic. Secondary sexual characteristics are characteristics that are typically associated with one biological sex or the other, but it's not just down to plumbing. So in humans, because we are sexually dimorphic. Di means how many? 2. Morph means form or shape. 2 shapes based on sex, sexually dimorphic, just like cardinals. And secondary sexual characteristics. Males tend to grow hair on their faces. Females tend not to grow heavy hair or coarse hair. And we grow fuzz. And my friend who's Greek claims that she could probably beat her husband at the eyebrow anyway. It's genetics. So secondary sexual characteristics include things like shoulder to waist ratio, height on average. Now, those secondary sexual characteristics are all on average. On average, human males tend to be a little taller, a little broader shouldered than human females. I'm going to tell you this. I got farm girl shoulders, and I'll tell you what, in high school, I just thought that I was not fit for human companionship, and I should probably go live on an island because I was a freak. Because I had crooked pinkies, and my shoulders were wider than some boy I liked. How humiliating. Oh my God, I am clearly never going to marry. Clearly. Because adolescents, you may know this. If you don't, I'm letting you in on a little secret. Adolescents tend to find a few characteristics of their own and then obsess about how awful they are and how they probably shouldn't be seen in public and how they're probably not fit to live among other humans, but you're all fine. Really, you are. Okay, my best friend's nose was crooked, and you could hardly tell, but oh my God, she obsessed about it because her nose was crooked. Let it go, Jen. Let it go. She was born that way. Hers was just crooked. Well, that's different. But anyway, these secondary sexual characteristics tend to line up in a particular way. They don't always. So we can have males who have tiny shoulders and females who have big old farm girl shoulders. We can have females like my friend who is Greek who grows a little bit of a mustache. She's Greek. It happens. We can have those things. It's normal. We can have guys who don't grow much of a mustache ever in their lives. It happens. It's okay. Indicates nothing about the underlying chromosomes or the plumbing. But those secondary sexual characteristics are useful in some ways. Okay, so let's go back to our slide here. Where's the issue? 23, the 23rd pair. Hey, look at this. Somebody got a bonus. So generally, let's flip back to here, XX is female and you produce eggs, and XY is male and you produce sperm. This individual got XXY. That's a trisomy. It's a trisomy of the sex chromosomes. So let's talk again about that usual versus normal. So this is a condition called Klinefelter's syndrome. And in Klinefelter's, baby is born, baby looks completely like a normal male. Mom and dad are told by the doctor, it's a boy! And he's a normal little boy. Totally normal little boy. And then comes puberty, and everybody else's voice is changing, and he's still talking like this. And everybody else is starting to get some fuzz, and he's not getting any fuzz. And everybody else is starting to get hair in other places, and he's in the locker room, and he's not getting hair in any other places. And eventually, mom and dad say, okay, look, all your brothers kind of went through this at like 13 or 14. You're 15 years old, and we're seeing no evidence of puberty. We're going to get this checked out. And they do some blood tests, and the blood test comes back and says, well, you got an extra chromosome. So Klinefelter's boys. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment. So, okay, whatever insecurity you may have, my hair is too curly, my hair is too straight, my pinkies are too crooked, my shoulders are too big, my nose is crooked, my face is funny. Oh my God, nobody's ever going to love me. Imagine being a 15-year-old boy who just found out he's got an extra chromosome and he's never going to go through puberty. And if he does have testicles, they might be pretty tiny, and they probably will never produce sperm. He will probably never be a father biologically. He could adopt, but his body isn't really going to produce eggs or sperm that are capable of reproduction. He's not going to be a dad biologically. He can adopt. He can find a partner who has kids. That would be a lot to process at 15. That's what Klinefelter's is like. So again, is that normal? Well, it is for this poor guy. Is it usual? No, it's fairly uncommon. There's another trisomy of the sex chromosomes, and that is when you get this. You get a triple X. That's Turner syndrome, and that's baby is born, everybody says, oh, it's a girl, and she looks fairly much like a normal girl. She probably has all the right girl plumbing. She may start menarche, which is the first period, sort of on time, but her ovaries may not really ever produce a whole lot of eggs. She may be a whole lot shorter than any female siblings she's got. She's probably going to have some cognitive impairments. In Turner's, I think that's the one where the hairline on females is typically low, so they've got a real short forehead, and the hairline, I think the hair, there are some typical observable physical characteristics. So again, this is one where, and this is usually caught a little bit earlier, it's caught before puberty, where, she's not growing, she's not thriving, they do a blood test and they say, okay, so you have Turner's, and what that means for you. Now, I do know someone, it was a sister-in-law of someone I knew, who had Turner's and went on to become a nurse. So obviously the cognitive impairment was not serious, but it's a different life. So there's one other one we'll talk about, normal versus usual. We haven't talked about this one yet. XY female. What? So there are individuals who are born, this is called androgen insensitivity. Baby's born, it's a girl. Everything is great, she looks like a normal girl, she's growing like a normal girl. Puberty comes, everybody else starts their period, she's still waiting. 13, 14, 15 passes. And usually that's the point at which blood work gets done. I actually knew a woman in college who, at age 15, found out that she would never be a mother biologically. She said, don't have a uterus, don't have ovaries. Oops. Sitting around having a conversation. We were all in our early 20s, sitting around drinking coffee, talking about periods, quite frankly. And she said, wouldn't know, never had one. 10 heads swivel. What? Nope, never had one, never will. Pardon me? Well, we're not going to go there. She found out at about 15 that she had no uterus. Now, it's one thing to decide you never want to go to Disneyland. The idea of Disneyland, I think it sounds repulsive and like horrifying and awful and too noisy and crazy. I would not want to go there ever. Whatever, you can have my ticket. There's a difference between deciding you don't want to go to Disneyland and being told, you are banned from Disneyland for life. I've known people who knew as teenagers that they did not want to have children. I have another friend who knew, she claims she knew at age 10 she didn't want to be a mom. She said, I would be a terrible mother. She had her tubes tied when she was 23. She did not want any part of being a parent, period, and she knew it. But this young lady, on the other hand, at 15 is told, you can't. It would be incredibly heartbreaking. Even if you had ambivalent feelings about becoming a parent, it would be really hard. And it also puts a real different spin on dating in your 20s when you're talking to people. Do you want to have kids? Well, it doesn't matter if I want to. I'm not going to have them biologically. Now, she could have adopted. As it turns out, she did not. She's an aunt. She's got a whole passel of nieces and nephews who adore her. She's a wonderful aunt. But she never had children biologically of her own. Like I said, she could have adopted. Is that normal? It is for her. It's not usual. So I want us to be really careful as we go with the concept of normal versus usual. Whatever you wake up with every morning, that's normal for you. It might not be common. It might not be usual. But it is normal. So I'm going to pause the video here. Going from these karyotypes, what we're going to start to talk about is how we get eggs and sperm out of that, and how out of those eggs and sperm from these things we get a baby. And then we'll talk about all the traits that get passed on, how they're inherited, all the rest of it. And as I said, what I'm going to try to do is any pictures that I'm going to use, I will put on Classroom so that you can pop them into your dossier. So as soon as you see them pop up, just save them to your iPad, and then you can pop them right in. Okay? That's it.